Hello, and welcome back to Unlikely Connections. I'm your host, Steph.
And I'm your co-host, Kellin.
And today we're going to be talking to you about how I became a correctional officer and how your
How I
use.
became a junkie. You can just say it.
how you became a junkie. Let's not split any hairs on this one.
Let's just get real with it.
Let's get real with it, guys.
Where do you want to start?
Let's just start from the beginning, my friend.
Okay.
So
With me or you?
yeah, let's start with you.
Okay.
Other than just trying drugs out, I'm gonna assume.
Yeah. How did I get there? So I look at it as kind of like a graduation, meaning or an elevation of like addictive behaviors. I've always had like addictive personality, but that's a term or a concept that a lot of people, I think, would agree they have themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, there's a lot of talk about like genetic predisposition and things like that. There's not a lot of really like addiction in my family and stuff. Mainly what elevated me from someone who was like a fan of using drugs, but had a very strong framework for like when it turned from fun or even a little bit of dependence into addiction, which like they define it turning from dependence to addiction in negative consequences, yet still doing the behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when it changed to that, it wasn't any one instance, but it was certainly with opiates. There was never a point where I, with any of the other experimentation I had done with other drugs like coke, weed, shrooms, alcohol, and I was a heavy experimenter and user, but I also had a lot of balance with like my keeping my life together. I didn't want to turn out like I didn't want to be out of control of something in my life.
Okay.
So for me, where it really changed was with the doctor. And I at that point in my life, I was in my early 20s and went in to see a doctor after a car accident, and knowing that he would prescribe me. So I knew through just the gossip or rumor mill that this guy was somebody who was loose with the prescription pad.
Just from people like that have gone to him?
Yeah, people that had gone to him like didn't say to me, "Oh, go to him, he fucking slings
He fixes
heavy."
everything.
Yeah, no, they were just, I just through observation, I was like, you get how much of this, and to put it into the correct, we really have to put it into the correct like mindset via time frame.
Oh yeah, what year are we talking here?
We're talking probably like 2008, 2007, something like that. That I went to go see him. And so this was before people knew what we know now, and including myself and pretty much everyone else. So I went, I'm trying to think of like a equivalent for today. The drug itself is so different and so much more serious than like a benzo, which is like your Xanax and Valium and things like that. But to kind of put it in perspective, we'll use that as an example, meaning say that you were like having a ton of anxiety and you're like, I need to go see a doctor for this anxiety. And your friend is like, oh, well, I get anxiety meds from my doctor. And then just through the course of being friends, you learn how much she gets. Oh man, you get a lot of those, so much so that you have extras to be like, hopefully not, but potentially giving to people or whatever, right? You learn that she gets like some of the highest dosages. The last thing you want to do is go see a doctor for an issue that you're having and have them not give you the medication that's going to fix it, right?
Right.
And so in that headspace, I went to see this guy who I knew was more than likely going to be willing to prescribe me pain meds. And this car accident happens. I know all this in my head. I go to see him. He lays it out for me as like, we can take this like 3 different routes. He's like, I can try to treat you with acupuncture, because he was kind of like a Boulder, like alternative medicine,
Like a spiritual
sort of,
like,
yeah,
okay,
practices like kung fu or some shit, and
yeah,
thinks that it like mitigates the effects.
He's
of,
all
like,
the sage will help.
Exactly. So he's like, so I can do that. I can refer you to a physical therapist, or for the immediate, I can do opioids for you, you know, but he didn't put it that way. He's put it as pain meds. And again, time frame. Like no
Right.
one knew
I
what
keep forgetting that.
yeah, no one knew what we were dealing with. I mean, maybe very few people did, but at the time, it was so different that it almost sounds like I'm lying or making it up. Like, yeah, right. People had to know.
Yeah.
Not any, no, you know, and we're not talking about like Appalachia, when we're talking about a very socially high up area. Boulder is like known for the rich people that it has and the education level that it has and all this stuff, right? And so I trusted that. In general, my mindset back then was how people also, I believe, were back then, which was like, I'm going to trust this doctor. I'm going to,
Which most do.
Which most
like believe that their doctor's there for you.
You kind of should be able to.
Yeah, like they're not going to do anything that's going to hurt you.
Well, there you go. Like I trusted him to the extent that he's not going to prescribe me stuff that's going to like ruin my life. It wasn't even a thought I was having that a doctor could give me a medication that would ruin my life. And so he says these three options. He says, I oftentimes do all three, you know, for people. And I said, all right, cool. Let's do all three.
All three of what?
The three options that he gave.
Like
physical therapy, acupuncture, or pain medication. And so he goes to write me for the pain medication and gives me a prescription strength that would now be considered inappropriate. Meaning he gave me a prescription strength that was like 15 milligram oxycodone for a back injury, you know.
And the typical nowadays is like,
I mean,
if we had to guess
nowadays, because of the like overcorrection in some cases, a lot of doctors wouldn't give me any kind of opioid.
Right.
They would say, no, you had a car accident, you know, these x-rays are showing that you don't have any broken bones or herniated discs or anything like that. You know, you have this back pain. Let's work it out through these other ways, because
with Tylenol or something like something small.
Right.
Ice and heat.
There you go. Because I don't want to ruin your life.
Yeah.
And so he writes me for these 15 milligram oxycodone pills, which are, just for reference point, like say you go and get your wisdom teeth pulled, they're generally going to give you like Vicodin or Percocet, and they're not going to give you the strongest amounts. They're going to give you like a 2.5 milligram or a 5 milligram. It's also mixed with Tylenol. And the strongest that both of those come in, if I'm getting this correct, with Percocet and Vicodin, are 10 milligram. But the general use for 10 milligram, again, is going to be for somebody who's gone through something more serious than having your wisdom teeth pulled or something like that. For example, my mom had a hysterectomy and she wasn't given 10 milligram Percocet. She was given, I think, like 7.5s or 5s. So then that's a surgery, like a major surgery.
Yeah.
So this guy did what I kind of counted on him doing, which was giving me a stronger medication than I needed. But there was no part in my mind thinking that this would become a problem. You know what I mean? Like the jump we have had in education from then to now, as far as how much we can trust the medications that were being prescribed, you know, and that the doctors even know what they're doing. I think that he knew what he was doing, in large part because he had already had his, I only found this out, you know, recently, so 15, 18 years later, that he had had his medical license revoked in California, and came here and got it and then started prescribing here. The reason for his revocation in California was the prescribing of narcotic medications outside the norms of medical practice, or some language like that, where California said, no, you can't be prescribing people narcotic medications and it's not, you can't do that. That is not what you do when someone comes in without broken bone, you know. And there's a huge amount of decision that is discretion, I should say, that is given to the doctors in their choices with our health care, period. Still to this day, not a lot is, sadly, virtually nothing has changed in that world minus the doctor's fear of repercussions for prescribing those,
Overprescribing.
for overprescribing, but as far as any policies or laws to protect patients, it doesn't happen. So slowly, I, not slowly, quickly, I become dependent on these medications because it was very serious medication. And there's a thing called informed consent. An informed consent is something that doctors are supposed to practice where they tell you what the options are and then tell you what the effects are. And it's informed consent, meaning I consent to your version of treating me with
Okay.
with an informed
with all the information you've given
Yes,
me.
right.
Now I'm part of this decision with you saying, yeah, let's do it.
Exactly. And so that was not happening with this anywhere around the country, as far as I'm concerned, and as much as I've researched about it. Doctors were not saying, this has a high likelihood to make you severely addicted. It's very similar chemically to heroin. It's you should only be on this very short term. You should only be using, there was none of that. And so I was
How much of that do you think was their own negligence versus their own information like they had
I think that
at the time, right?
yeah, I think that it was chosen negligence in a lot of ways. I think the information that they were getting in the rooms with the medical reps. So medical reps come in, it's a very common, normal practice still to this day. They will come into a doctor's office multiple times a week to pitch their medication, to say, when you have a patient that comes in with back pain, prescribe our medication. It's been shown to be only addictive 3% of the time, and things like that. So that's pretty highly documented. There's a lot of like opioid documentaries and things because of the epidemic that we found ourselves in, explaining these sort of things about their role, the pharmaceutical reps' role. So big pharma hires a bunch of really good looking people, gives them a huge budget and says, go to these doctors' offices, buy them big lunches, throw picnics, do whatever you can get the doctor's office staff, because usually they arrange the schedule for the day, get them to do whatever you can to schmooze and make this doctor happy whilst convincing them that our medication is good. So to answer so to answer your question, how much of it was informed? I mean, he had to know. He had his fucking license revoked in California for overprescribing narcotic medications. However, chosen ignorance around this is a huge problem with doctors nowadays. They know on some level that the facts, quote unquote, that they're being fed by these drug reps and which is essentially they're being fed by the pharmaceutical companies, are highly manipulated through the studies that they offer the FDA. So when a drug company wants to get a drug approved, they do not have to show the FDA the studies that didn't show what they wanted to show. So if they have a bunch of studies that show that the medicine is highly addictive,
so good, it's helpful,
and stuff like this, like I was not an angel.
And that's. Had you ever tried heroin before?
No. God,
so before that, you never tried heroin.
Never
you were
done
a drug user, but not heroin.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what kind of drugs were you using?
Like when I started seeing the doctor?
Yeah.
I would consider myself like a fairly average, young 20-something person. I think I was 23. So I would do like cocaine maybe once or twice a month, and then go like 3 months without doing it at all. And then, and I would smoke weed maybe like 3 times a week, and then go like 2-3 months without it at all.
So you weren't like an everyday user of any substance. You were just
alcohol more than anything, but not every day. No.
Yeah.
Because I worked in a restaurant, and so after work at the restaurant, I would drink a little bit. So I was very much not looked at that way, considered to be that way any more so than anyone else in that sort of phase of their life. Maybe different than like those who were very straight and narrow, but no, I had never done any kind of opiates or any other like heroin or anything like that. In fact, I've often told people, had somebody come to me my first time using opioids and said, try this heroin, I would have said, get fucked. Hell no. That would have never been the way it was. And slowly, but it really wasn't that slow. I say slowly because it felt sneaky. It felt like all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was like dependent on these medications. And in fact,
what did it feel like though? Like, how
Well,
could you notice that you were, like, getting
yeah, that
dependent
that
on
was
it?
happening. I would sometimes, like, run out because, again, I didn't really need these pain medications that badly that, like, I couldn't take a couple days off or something like that. But I also would, then maybe give 1 or 2 away to somebody who's like, "Oh, like, I want one, whatever." And so I realized at a certain point, maybe 3 to 6 months into seeing the doctor, I thought I had an ulcer. So I actually, like, went about treating myself for this, like, ulcer I thought I had, but what it was withdrawal symptoms. And so early on, again, like 3 months, 6 months into being on those medications, I kind of realized, "Oh, like, when I don't have these, I have a reaction." But again, there was no informed consent. So I had really no clue, like, what I was dealing with. And so I thought, "Oh, okay, whatever. I guess I should just, like, try to be less regular about taking the medication that this doctor is giving me," right?
Yeah.
And in that attempt, I realized, "Oh, I can't do that and go to work and whatever." So it was quick that I got dependent on this
'Cause would
medication.
it, like, hurt, or you just, like, your body was, like,
I
you were a
couldn't do
different mood, you
anything.
just couldn't do anything? You no
Well,
motivation?
those
Like, what does it
earlier
feel like?
those earlier withdrawals felt like painful stomach cramping and um diarrhea and like goosebumps, feeling cold while you're feeling really hot, not being able to sleep. I couldn't sleep at all. I would have like these like downward mood swings where, like, out of nowhere I would be like ready to leave this planet, out of nowhere, no,
Yeah.
like, event causing me to actually be sad, just like out of nowhere. And it was psychological hell is kind of what it was. The physical symptoms at that point in dependence or addiction weren't, I mean, they were I would characterize them as severe, but not as severe as they would eventually get. And so I kind of, again, keeping it in the time frame and mindset of where we were at, I kind of was like, you know what? This doctor's telling me to take these. Why am I trying to stop a medication that the doctor's telling me to take?
Right, 'cause again, you're still thinking that this is good for you
I'm still
because
thinking
you're
that,
like, "This
yeah.
doctor's helping me."
Well, and one of those, to your question about how it felt, my back pain was through the roof when I wouldn't take the, like, pain in general all over my
Mm.
body, but my back pain was like, I couldn't really do anything throughout the whole day. So it was crippling is kind of the answer to that question. Um, and so I just said, okay, I'm just going to be better about, like, not giving any of my medication to anybody and having enough to, like, take some each day and whatever. Um, and
'Cause how much are you taking at this point? Like, you're starting out, like, how many pills are you taking a day
yeah, yeah.
at
At
the
this
beginning?
point, I think I was being prescribed like 2 or 3 oxycodone 15 milligram a day. So it's still quite a bit. But that's about how much we're talking.
Mhm.
So 30 to 60 milligrams of oxycodone a day.
Wow.
And that was, yeah. But that was, I mean, that was nothing. It would turn out to be that was absolutely nothing. And so I go back to the doctor, and this is where it gets a little bit hard to, like, confess that I am, like, flawed and that I have this addictive nature about me, and that I like drugs and things like this, because all the other drugs ever in my life I was able to stop. When I stopped, I didn't go into, like, this crazy physical withdrawal and this crazy psychological hell. I mean, it would maybe be hard if I had been drinking a lot, or smoking a lot of weed, or even if I had, done cocaine for 4 weekends in a row. It might even kind of be like, a couple few days where I was, like, down or out. But it was never anything like the psychological and physical hell that withdrawing from opioids was. And so, while owning that piece of me, that I'm someone who likes drugs and likes the effects of them, you know, I also did not have the agency and power to hold my control over opioids versus other. I mean, cocaine's a serious fucking drug. Alcohol's a serious fucking drug. I was close enough on the edge of, like, using and binge drinking, and, I mean, I was simultaneously someone who was, like, doing these things that can ruin lives, but would always have control over it enough to stop for long periods of time and get my shit back together. And someone who was, as it would turn out, like, like, I don't know. So this is tough, right? Because there's a lot of responsibility on both parties as far as like the doctor and me. And
Because essentially, like most people, especially listeners, are going to say, it's addictive. It's going to possibly
right.
do that, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the easy thing that we all have known. But in reality, like everything can be addictive. Your phone, too much technology, too much running,
Yeah.
things can be addictive and good for you. And essentially, you're thinking that this person's doing something good for you.
Well, I was informed with the rest of it. I knew cocaine would fuck my life up.
Yeah.
I knew alcohol would fuck my life up if I let it. With the medication, I didn't know that that was an option. It's like me trying to tell someone now, oh, like SSRIs are highly fucking addictive and hard to get off of. That information is not out there. And in fact, a lot of doctors would disagree with me. There's a lot of doctors who have written books, and
Right.
we're at a similar point with those. They are not going to
I can't wait
destroy
for that to come out when it does.
Yeah.
Because it is.
Because it is true.
I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
That shit is very addictive.
And it won't destroy your life likely like opioids will, because it's a different drug and etc. But that's kind of like a similar thing. Opioids are one of these drugs that are kind of magical in that sense. Like if you need more energy, they'll kind of fucking sometimes give it to you because they're turning off the signals that are telling you you're tired and you're whatever. Now, high enough doses, yeah, they'll knock you out, right? But you figure out very quickly before you're even dependent, you figure out what amounts of doses to use for what results, right?
Yeah.
It can do the opposite for you. It can make it so that like if you need to chill and like fucking go under, then you take a little more and maybe add a beer or something, and then you're going to be able to pass out. And so I'm kind of having a similar situation. I'm being bumped up to like manager at my restaurant that I'm working at, and I'm, taking on extra work, and I'm getting amazing tips and amazing reviews from the customers because I'm constantly cheery and happy, and I'm doing the job well, and I'm right. I'm kind. I'm all these things, and simultaneously I'm going in once a month to the doctor and generally reporting after, maybe not each month, but every few months, reporting, hey, like, can we up this a little bit? It just doesn't seem to be lasting. So the doctor would ask me when I would go in, he would say, how's it going? Literally was his, how's it going? And I would say something to the degree of like, the pain is so there came a point where I started having to lie in order to keep receiving the medication that I knew if I was cut off from, I would go into that psychological and physical hell. And there was a huge lack of information like out on the internet or from anybody, out in the world. I was kind of one of these early adopters to opioids. And a bit of a canary in the coal mine, so I had this time period described as being maybe like, well, it really lasted all the way throughout, of like this dance that he and I were playing, where he's asking me how the pain is. He's not asking me to go see these physical therapists that he initially talked about. That was all
that big plan he had,
bullshit.
that 3-level plan.
He's done this before.
We're jumping.
He knows I'm
3.
addicted at this point, and so he asked me, "How's it going?" All I really had to do was say, the medication's just not lasting throughout the day, and he would up my dosage. And I knew that this was going on with the person that had originally told me how much she was getting from him, was also having the same experience. Yeah, and her mom actually saw the same doctor and was on opioids.
Wow.
Yeah, like this guy was giving you opioids basically just if you asked. He had to cover a few boxes to be like, does this hurt? And like move your leg a little bit. And if you said, yeah, that was enough for him, right? Which would eventually lead to him getting indicted and all that. But to keep it on this track of like, how am I addicted? There became this point again, and it wasn't just once that I got sick or whatever. I had multiple times in those first 3 to 6 months of being prescribed by him, tried to stop myself, and not take the medication, but I couldn't make it to my job. I couldn't like hang out with my girlfriend. Things were very dark, like I said, psychologically. So I was like kind of running into, when I stop these medications, I'm like a lot more suicidal than normal.
Yeah.
So I didn't know really what to do. And I didn't trust that if I said something to the doctor that he was going to have an answer for me that would allow me to, like, continue living my life, would allow me to not go to, um, rehab or something like that, but it was on this kinda cusp. Again, my life wasn't falling apart. I had an apartment, I had a girlfriend, I had a car, I paid my bills, like, everything was going fine besides the fact that when I didn't have this medication, it was a pure nightmare. And so I started doing, and this is where my part like definitely comes into play. I started doing this like act and not telling him what I was going through, as far as when I would not have the medication. Maybe a little bit, I might be like, he might be like, well, okay, so if it's not enough, are you running out? And I would say, yeah, but I really try not to, because when I do, and I would give him a very like light version of what I'm telling you. When I do, I'm in so much pain, which was true, and so his logic was, well, let's keep giving this guy what he needs to keep that pain at bay. I wasn't sharing, the details of my fears around like where this leads, because I just didn't think again that we were dealing with something of that caliber. It was weird. It was both. It was like I knew intuitively that we were dealing with something of that caliber.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, I was like a young 20 something guy. And like, of course, I'm going to want to like move up in my job, and I'm going to want to
Yeah.
feel good about myself. And like the mental health issues that I'd had all my life were like, as long as I had the opioids, those were gone. Like there was so many benefits to this. And the doctor wasn't acting like it was a problem. He
And
was
it
just
wasn't impacting your life to where it was like ruining it.
not at
Like
all.
it
It was
actually was
improving it.
doing improving
Yeah.
it.
Fuck yeah, it was.
Fuck.
And like
Fuck.
during this period, people were starting to like realize this quote unquote, like not on the streets, but like in the bars and at work and random areas of my life where I'm like, oh, other people are also realizing this magic pill can like make their lives better. And so that gave me a sense of like, well, if a lot of us are doing this, then it can't be that bad. And if it's all coming from doctors, which it was at that point, one of the things that gets lost in the conversation nowadays is the fentanyl and the Chinese and the Mexicans, and they're bringing in all these opioids, and yeah, they're fueling a demand that was created 100% by doctors and by pharmaceutical companies. 100%. And there's multiple documentaries and things that show that.
Well, you're living proof of that,
I'm living proof. And there's
which is wild.
many.
How long did it take you to realize that it was controlling you now? Because you're seeing it a little bit,
Yeah.
and you're noticing it a little bit. Was it like a year, a month?
I would say it was probably about at a year of seeing him
Shit.
that I realized, like, okay,
A year
like,
too late then.
Yeah,
Because
uh-huh.
it's so deep.
well, yeah. By that point, he's prescribing me. I don't have the medical records in front of me, but
Yeah.
roughly around a year, he's upped my dosage to before a year, but maybe at 9 months or something, he upped me to the 30 milligram oxycodones, so double what I had been on before.
Because you started with 15.
Because I started with 15s, and he had gotten kind of to this peak. I think at a certain point, he was giving me 7 or 8 15s a day prescription for that amount.
Oh.
And so then
And this is a year after your car accident.
yeah, after yeah, exactly.
Which I'm not saying you had any broken bones or anything, but like what, 6 to 8 weeks to heal from something when
Dude,
usually something happens?
I
Like
would've
even
been-
major surgeries?
Exactly.
Like most major surgeries are 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, exactly.
And it's like you.
Yeah.
Damn.
And there was no conversation. Again, this was not informed consent. This was not being communicated. His office was full. Every time I had to make an appointment, it was like, make it today while you're here on this visit for like, your next couple
Yeah.
visits, because if you don't, like, you won't be able to get in to see us. You will run out of medication, right? He was busy making lots of money, juicing the system, right? But yeah, so at a year ish, I had been up to these 30 milligram oxycodones. He had started giving me Valium as well, so a benzo as well. Which I often didn't honestly even need because of how high the amounts of oxy were. And in fact,
But just in case you needed it.
well, what I would do is I would set them aside in case I ran out of my oxys to have something to reduce the pain of the withdrawals. It didn't really work. Because there's nothing really that solves withdrawals, besides like your Suboxones or your methadones, which are other forms of opiates. And so at this point, whatever, or 2008, something like that, and I'm, getting these oxycodone 30 milligrams now, and the doctor is still not pushing me to like get off of them for sure. He just asked me each time I saw him, okay, like, do you wanna, or how's it going?
Yeah.
And I,
This whole song and
the
dance.
whole song and dance, and I've gotten pretty good at it, and he has too at this point. I mean, he already was. He came into it being good at it, but I was getting pretty good at like saying the right things as far as like every few months saying I need more, not every visit, kind of really just like playing the part, quote unquote, if you will, of like the patient and exaggerating for sure by that point, exaggerating the back pain. And that, so it would turn out to last like 7 years. At around
You were with that doctor for 7 years?
7 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there's no
Wow.
oversight. These are some of the problems that we deal with now. That there was no oversight. There was nobody was raising any flags. And this community existed like under everyone's noses. I knew a guy who was a nurse at a medical facility who was addicted to oxy pills.
Same in the prisons.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
They were
Yeah.
doing lines off the bathroom like
Yep.
the back of the toilet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. Everybody, for the most part, enjoyed it. I knew very few people that were like, I don't like those.
Yeah.
Most people loved them.
Mhm.
And just didn't have the circumstances like I did, where I'm getting this constant, steady supply for like the cost of a doctor's visit and filling the prescription, and so the access for those people maybe helped keep them slightly safer. But I knew plenty of people who didn't have the direct access to the doctor that got heavily addicted. And that's because of doctors like mine being everywhere that were overprescribing. There was some statistic sometime in like 2014 or something around there, the peak kind of all these problems, that said there was enough oxys being prescribed for every person in America to take one every day.
Every person in America?
Every citizen in America, including fucking children. So, like, the population of America, there was
Oh my
enough.
God.
So those pills were getting onto the street somehow. It wasn't
Right.
at this point. There was no underground market that was stamping pills and putting fentanyl in them. There was none of that. This was 100% the medical establishment giving people oxys at high rates, addicting families, ruining lives, all of this stuff. Again, under the guise of it's safe. And if someone gets addicted to it, they are the problem.
Right.
They are the broken one. It's not the fact that they're trusting their doctor who's giving them. I mean, dude, at certain points, like I was being prescribed 180 oxycodone 30 milligrams a month.
How many?
180.
Oh my
180 a
gosh.
month.
I'm trying to do math in my head. I'm like, that's
yeah.
30 days. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, basically, there was a point where I was being prescribed. I think it was like enough for 7 or 8 of them a day, like being prescribed that many.
Wow.
And yeah, it was fucking wild. And then I'm trying to remember 180. I think I got no, because at one point I was being prescribed enough for be taking 10 a day. So at one point I was getting 300, and this lasted for years, like 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 on the back half of that 7 years, where I'm getting 10 oxycodone 30 milligrams a day. And I'm getting, this is
Wow.
insane.
This is so crazy.
It was so insane. And I was getting, fentanyl patches. So I was being prescribed 15 100 microgram is how they measure fentanyl patches per month. So every 2 days, and the fentanyl patch is made to be changed every 3 days, but the third day doesn't really provide quite as much pain. And he was like, that's okay. Take it off, swap it out every 2 days. This fentanyl patch, 100 microgram fentanyl patch. I think the highest they make is 150. So they make 25s, 50s, 75s, or at least they did then. And I had patients, like cancer patients, that were jealous of the amount of prescriptions I was getting. And by this point, I was so heavily addicted. It was insane how much there would be days that I would because I'm crushing them and sniffing them at this point. The fentanyl patch.
Because why? Orally taking it doesn't do the same?
Exactly. It doesn't impact me the same way. And I've become a full-on addict at this point, where I need to like not get sick, but I'm also needing and wanting to like get high on these pills. And then when with the fentanyl patches, they made them so that they could be cut open. There was a gel inside that it delivered through the skin with these patches. But if you just didn't put it on and you cut the corner, you could smoke the insides of the fentanyl patches, and that was next level. I mean, as we all now know, fentanyl is an insanely strong drug. So it was, and throughout that process, the doctor was just going along with things, right? I had become so addicted that I was coming in early for my prescriptions. So these numbers that I'm talking about, the 300 oxycodone, 30 milligrams a month, and the 15 100 microgram fentanyl patches a month are not a month. They're every like 24 days. The pharmacy won't fill it before that. At least back then, they had like a 24-day thing, meaning we'll fill your prescriptions a week early, 31 days in a month, right? But we will not do it. And that was like a standard. There must have been some federal law or something that I couldn't get any pharmacy to do it before the 24-day mark. And the doctor would ask me, like, why? And I just said, it got so obvious at a certain point that like my excuses were laughable. I was opening my medication over the sink and I accidentally dropped a bunch of them down the drain, or man, I went on this trip and I accidentally left my stuff at the hospital and da, da, da. And he was getting this not just from me, but from like 12, 15, 25 patients a day. And so he was just saying,
He's like,
cool.
whatever, let me just put something in your chart. He's
Yeah.
like, yep, lost in the mail.
Right, exactly. Because there's one of the big pieces
Wow.
of how this happened was that there is still to this day virtually no accountability for these doctors, meaning they can do this stuff and the medical boards are the ones that are supposed to keep doctors in line, the state medical boards. So each state has a medical board that keeps the doctors adhering to like acceptable medical prescribing practices, etc. Right? They also handle when doctors are being accused of like molesting patients, like if they've had caught legal charges, the state medical board handles whether they allow them to continue being licensed to practice medicine, because the courts don't handle that. The state medical board does, right?
But isn't that their peers?
It's their peers. It's a bunch of doctors that they either went to school with. They don't even have to know them.
They're just doctors.
Yeah, doctors have a similar thing as police do, where it's kind of this like thin blue line sort of deal, where it's like, yeah, you can do a lot of fucked up shit, but as long as you're my people, I don't give a shit. And so these state medical boards, they're one of the least talked about aspects of all this, because they have access to all the information about what these doctors are prescribing. They have control over the doctors' licenses, and they virtually never punish their revoke licenses. You have to get a criminal conviction and a serious one for them to
do like a malpractice.
Yeah, for that. Yeah, there's no accountability. And he knew that. And so he knew that he could have basically a trap house fucking doctor's office and
sell drugs.
And sell drugs, All you have to do, the other thing that he did that was smart, frankly, was he had some regular patients. So like when he did eventually get in trouble, my doctor, when he did eventually get in trouble, there were these people that came to the court or wrote letters to the court and testified to him being a good person who helped them with their eczema or whatever it was.
Their eczema.
Yeah. So he had like a few.
Not to be haters towards that, but like get out of here.
Yeah. So these
this
people
guy's in trouble for a lot of shit.
For like big shit, yeah. And so, but he had these other people that like were outside of his drug dealing stuff. And
was he ever convicted?
He was convicted, and he lost
his
license.
Were you a part of that trial?
I was not. No. So like that's actually a really good question. I was in the courthouse one day talking to my public defender. So by this point, I had actually stopped seeing him, because there came a point finally after 7 years where he wasn't even really doing UAs. Most doctors that prescribe pain medications will do UAs to make sure that you have the pain medication in your system. You're proving you're not selling them.
Okay.
And to make sure that you don't have other drugs that could kill you, like cocaine or something, in your system. He hadn't done UAs on me for like the whole of 6 years. And then on that 7th year, he started, doing them again, because the temperature started getting turned up on a lot of this. People's loved ones were dying and becoming severe addicts and like stealing from that, and like the spotlight was on at this point, and I think he realized that, and so he started doing UAs, and I ended up having a UA that didn't have stuff in it. It had opioids, but not the right opioids, and he was like, "Oh, like, are you getting?" It was I didn't know if he was this dumb or if he was feigning, if this was part of a dance, but he's like, "I don't know," because I started doing heroin by this point, in the process, which I suppose we shouldn't glaze over. There,
Yeah. Like, that's a big jump.
that's a big jump. So, like, there was a point where he enough medication to not get sick became impossible for me. It had a lot to do with I was dating a girl who was also addicted to opioids, and it had a lot to do with the amount of opioids we were consuming between the two of us made it so that I did not have enough to get through or even close. I was running out at like 10 days for what was supposed to be a, 25-day, well, 30-day really, but
Damn,
25
in
day
10 days.
in 10 days.
Well, because now you have somebody else that's
Now I
taking
have
it with you.
somebody else that's taking it with me, and I'm taking so much of it, that there came a point where I mean, the way it went down, I was like, because I really resisted hard going to heroin for a long time. I saw a lot of people do it already. A lot of the people in my circle, multiple circles out that were moving on to heroin. So I would call somebody and I would be like, "Hey, dude, can you get me some oxys?" No, but I can get you some heroin. No, 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 for years. And finally, there just came a point where I was going to be severely sick and not be able to make it to my job and my whole life fall apart if I did not get some kind of opioid in me. And the only option was heroin that day. It happens slow. So then, like that day, I did heroin as a substitute, but then I was back to my pill, or maybe I did it for a few days until I could get back to buying some pills from somebody, or my prescription came up, or something like that. And then the next month, same thing happened, and I could only make the money or things work, for long enough. And so now I'm having to fill in 7 days with heroin, and I'm only sniffing it at this point. We're talking about like powder form heroin. And then the version of intake changed to where I started smoking it. Uh,
Is it because it wasn't affecting you when you would
when I would sniff
smoke?
it.
Yeah.
Um,
Or
it,
was it
it was that
like,
I could use a smaller amount and get the high to last a similar amount of time. So at
okay.
this point, it's like it's drug budgeting.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how I can stretch this bag of heroin to make it last the longest amount of time, and not get sick.
Is heroin cheap?
Heroin's cheap. Yeah.
Is it cheaper than all the drugs on the
Mm,
market, I guess?
that's an interesting question to try to answer because
Because I'm assuming that's not the only opioid, right? I
that's
don't
like
know.
on the streets,
Yeah.
you mean?
Is there other
Um,
like, I'm so ignorant right now, bro. Like, because
Nowadays,
all I know is cocaine, heroin,
right.
fentanyl,
Yeah, yeah.
weed.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
You
Now
know?
to try to answer your question about like cheapness and availability. So those are
Because
now
I'm like, in my head, I'm like, why heroin? Like, if I needed an opioid.
it was the only alternative that was going to pack the punch that I needed at that state in my
Okay.
my addiction. And it was widely available compared to maybe I could find somebody with some Percocets or something, right? But then
Mhm.
there's two problems there. I can't use those Percocets because they are not going to do the trick. A Percocet, remember, is like 1/3 of one pill, and I was taking 10 of those, and that's the strongest Percocet is 1/3 strength of
Oh,
one thing.
shit.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about tiny, tiny, tiny little amounts in Percocets, Vicodins, or even a single Oxy 30. At that stage in my drug addiction, that might have cost me $15. I could get a bag of heroin for $15. That's going to get me
Ugh.
through, half day, maybe a whole day. An Oxy 30 at that point is going to get through me through 2 hours, maybe, you know. So it's all just like this, like calculations and what's available and trying to get the most bang for your buck, not because, oh, I want to get this level of high at that point, but more. I mean, some of that when I was flush with cash and shit, sure, but you're not. And so that's why I would go for the heroin eventually, was because it was available, it was stronger, and it was cheaper. So I bring it all back. I peed hot to the doctor, after taking my UA. He's like, looks here like you've been borrowing morphine pills from some other patient. And I'm like, are you this fucking stupid? Like that, because heroin
Come
shows
the
up.
fuck on, guy.
I know. It shows up the same on a UA as morphine. And so he in his I believe, chosen ignorance was saying, well, you're getting these pills from a different patient and you're not taking yours because they weren't in my urine at that point because I had sold all mine or whatever, hadn't had them when I
Yeah, it's
was
not in your
baby.
system
It's not
anymore
in my
because
system.
obviously you're using heroin now. So,
Yeah,
like,
right. Like I would still use the oxys and definitely the fentanyl, but more at that point, in those late years of seeing that doctor, not even years, I think it was the last year that I had switched to heroin. That was what was going on. And so no, when it went from these prescription drugs that I had papers to show police and if I did get in any kind of trouble or anything,
you
and
just blame it on the fact that you're on this prescription.
well, or if I'm being fucked with by the cops because I'm slowly but surely becoming more criminal in my like actions in life because I'm way more addicted now, and criminality and addiction tend to go hand in hand. And so if I'm having police contact at this point, I'm showing them, and they find fentanyl patches or oxys on me, I have prescriptions for them.
Hmm.
And so in that first year of not having prescriptions, I mean, a couple things happen. I now lose this huge source of income because I had changed when I switched to heroin, started selling all my meds, and the price had gone up a lot because a lot of people didn't want to switch to heroin. They wanted to keep doing the
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 prescription meds,
safe
the safe
stuff. Yeah.
pills from the
Yeah.
doctor.
And so they had gone from shit when I first started. I think an oxycodone 30 milligram was like $7,
Hmm.
maybe. And if you bought a handful, you could maybe get it down to 6 or 5. By that point, they were selling for like 15 or 20 even. And so 300 oxycodone 30s at 15 or 20 bucks a piece is a decent chunk of change.
Yeah.
It didn't work out that way. It wasn't like, oh, I got my meds, I'm gonna sell them all, and I got these thousands of dollars. That's just not like I would owe people from, hey, let me borrow some when I get my script, I'll give you some of mine. I would, the girl I was dating was really not wanting to do the heroin stuff. And so she's, please save enough for me. So I really only had a small amount to like make money off of.
Yeah.
All said and done, I would often do some of them still. I was at that point where I would still do some, because I wasn't fully like adapted to the heroin. It's big enough switch that like you tend to be kind of one or the other unless you're in that. It's different for everybody, but period of months or maybe a year. For me, I think it was a year and a half of like switching to the heroin. So when I get cut off from the doctor, I now am cut off from the potential for like $5,000 to $7,000 if I sold everything, one at a time at the highest price, no bulk prices, none of that shit.
Yeah.
It would equate to that much money.
Shit.
It wasn't, but still was
But
probably
still, yeah.
changing it so that I'm not making the 3,000 that I'm making off my medication at that point in the addiction. So I lose that source of income. I'm deep enough in my addiction that I'm sure my job prospects and stuff were like very temporary. I'd probably go work somewhere for like a few months, if that, and then get too sick to be able to show up for work one day and have to like get fired, basically. So I'm in the courthouse. I had gotten caught in possession of like heroin and cocaine. And so my public defender is like, hey, like he's talking me through like, this is how much time you're facing for this charge and the various ways to approach the legal stuff that I'm dealing with. And then he goes, after 15 minutes or so of talking about my stuff, he goes, also, the DA wants to talk to you. I guess your name has been popping up a lot. And I'm like, fuck, because I was doing enough criminal shit at this point.
You're like, great.
Yeah. And I had in my past been like a cocaine dealer.
Every bad thing you ever did is like going through your head. You're like, what the fuck?
And it's not even that much of like that far back.
Right. You're like
every
last week.
Yeah,
You're like the whole week.
The last week previous to get me in a lot of fucking trouble. And so I'm like, great, and the public defender's like, no, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like he wants you to like help him. And I'm like, okay, like go find out what we're talking about. Cause he was trying to get me to like agree to a deal before knowing what we were talking about. I'm like, dude, I'm not just going to blindly agree to like testifying against somebody if you're trying to get me to like testify against some scary ass fuck. Like, fuck, no. Plus, in general, I'm not going to snitch. So I had no idea in my mind of any way that it could be a positive thing because I'm not going to fucking snitch, right?
Right.
But I'm like, if you want to talk to him and find me out some more information, and you're saying that it can help me not do like a chunk of time on this charge that I have, I would like to know what the fuck
You
he's
know, it's worth
talking
a
about.
conversation. It's
Mhm.
worth a
Right,
conversation.
yeah.
You know?
So he comes back and he's like, yeah, like, did you see a doctor named Larry Eckstein? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, he's been indicted for overprescribing people. And when he said your name was popping up a lot, it's because you're considered as one of his primary victims. And they want you to testify to like what that was all about and what that was like and, et cetera. Right. And I said, oh, fucking bet. Hell yeah.
You're
Fuck
all,
that dude.
oh,
Yeah.
fuck that guy.
Yeah, I'm like, fuck that guy. And because at this point in my life, I've recognized like his part that was played in my addiction. Now, again, like there's enough blame to pass around. I was
Yeah.
no innocent party in all this, but I never would have become the addict that I became without the doctor. It just wouldn't
Yeah.
happen. I never would have gotten to the point of dependence on the drug had I not had the doctor.
Got you.
Like in fact, previous to ever seeing the doctor, I had tried Percocets on the weekends or
Yeah.
something before, and it was cool, whatever, but it'd be weeks or months between, or just never even thinking about it again. You know, that was how my relationship with drugs. That's how it went. Is it once the negatives outweighed the positives,
You weren't doing
I
it.
was an individual who was going to stop. And that's not everybody. And I understand that. So no, I was like, fuck this dude, because in my mind, and I still believe this to this day, I would have never become an addict, capital A addict, without that doctor feeding me oxys under the guise of medicine for years. Right.
Yeah.
And high amounts of it. Right.
Yeah.
And offering me no off ramps and never checking like, hey, this
Never
is
trying to wean you off.
never trying to wean
or
me
like
off
being like,
or-
let's try to taper you a little bit and then see if that helps the pain kind of stuff. Because
None of that. None of that.
wow,
Yeah.
just
Um,
full gas on.
Just full gas pedal. Let's go. How much
Yes.
can how many kickbacks I'm sure for him, how many kickbacks can I get from the pharmaceutical companies for being one of their top prescribers?
Could you imagine if he had like like his white coat had all of the investments he
Like a
had on it,
fucking
bro? Like a
race
fucking
car driver?
like yeah,
He's like,
just
"Yeah,
everywhere,
sponsor."
everywhere. Like he's like yeah,
He might as
and he got
well
this gold patch from
Yeah, right?
this. Like,
He might as well have.
fuck,
That's how it was going down, man.
damn.
So they offered like for me to testify against them, and they said, but we can't do anything with your case until that happens. Next time I went in for my case, they were like, yeah, he pled down. It was like one single felony charge of distribution of a controlled substance or something like that.
Out of all of it,
Yeah.
and to just get it distribution,
Yeah. So the
of-
charges exactly. And whilst
which is like not heard of in this time period, because if a drug dealer sold me something and I died, they would find that person and they would convict him of it.
Of
Like
murder.
in this time period.
In this
Of
time period,
murder.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm thankful that they do that, but it's still one of those things. It's like, yeah, there does have to be some type of liability on everybody involved, not just you as the individual user.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right,
Like
exactly.
it's no different if I went to the bar and just got hammered and the bartender let me get
Yeah.
completely gone and then get into a car and roll my car and hurt someone.
Yeah. That's how
Like
the law
there is some type of liability.
Exactly.
You can't just always put it on the person. I don't believe that.
No, because it's just not true.
It's
I mean,
not.
the
It's an easy button to say that this is your fault. Like you took
Mhm.
those drugs, you felt the effects that were
Right.
happening to your body.
Yeah.
You can tell like this was changing you.
mm-hmm.
The fact I think that some people miss is that you have no control over that. Like essentially what's happening to your body when a chemical imbalance, it's like somebody saying like, oh, you're depressed. Don't be depressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The changes to my
My
brain.
body is doing it.
Mhm.
Like I can't stop that.
And that's dependence. That's
Right.
the dependence piece. And then they start calling it addiction once the negatives of the life of the choice to use the drug outweigh the positives of the choice to use the drug. Then they start. And so that the irony is that addiction really is like kind of a blame game. It's like, at what point do we put it on the individual? Well, once things are problematic, then we put it on them. Okay, so they got problematic because your whole fucking system, like, created this person's disease. And
Yeah.
now that they have the disease, like, it's their fault. It's
And
like,
they solely have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like that's what it is.
100%. Yeah, there's very little help, and very little help that's actually effective. The metaphor, maybe it's a simile, maybe it's an analogy. I'm not smart enough to know, but that I use,
It's one of them.
it's one of them for this, is that when they have people that rob a bank and someone gets shot and killed, right? The getaway driver also gets charged
Thank you.
with the murder, right?
Yes.
And so in this
Put it in
circumstance,
that context of mind
exactly,
understanding.
yeah, because without him driving those motherfuckers to the
They couldn't
bank,
get away.
it never happens,
Mhm.
right? And so that's how I look at this. Yeah, maybe, some people, I look at myself as being like the getaway driver. Yeah, it never happens without me being a part of it. But did I go into the bank and shoot the motherfucker and take the cash and da-da-da-da?
Yeah.
No, that was the doctor doing all that shit. He was dealing the drugs. He was making the money. He was benefiting. He was, knowingly doing these things.
Probably doing them too.
Well, probably.
Let's be real.
Yeah,
Come
probably.
on.
There's a good chance that he was also.
Whatever happened to him?
I don't. Well,
We should, if we don't know, we should find out.
I know this much. I've seen his ass.
Oh.
Yep. I was waiting tables at one point.
Woo.
Yeah, dude, it was crazy. I was waiting tables
To
and
be a fly on the wall.
and nobody at the knew my history.
Yeah.
And so this dude, the doctor, comes in with like a large group. It was like a party of 8. And so I think it was like some of his family and shit. And they get sat in my section. So it was right around year 13. So I had 6 years of living, 6 or 7 of living in heroin addiction and homelessness and like couching felonies and being in jail and being in halfway houses and being in various forms of like custody, like forced custody rehabs. I'd finally gotten enough shit right to like be out, like putting my life back together. I had this job. I was waiting tables. I had a roof over my head. I had a car, but I was still using heroin. He sits in my section with all these people. And I told my manager, I was like, I can't wait on that person. And she was like being a bitch about it. And I was like, trust me, like
You don't want me
you
to wait
don't
on this
want me to wait
person.
on this person. So I didn't, and I'm sure I fucking just like avoided him the whole time. But it took a lot for me to, because as much as I'm able to like own my part of it, the damage done to my life even to this day is at such high levels, and the damage done to like my family and the people around me and the various things is at such levels that I want to hurt him, what I
Yeah.
want to do. And I say not quite worth it because it's damn close.
You're like,
Right.
well, we will talk soon. Take care of one another. And remember, always try to make an unlikely connection.